Hola amigos! Coming up in this episode, so it's only a 245 meter drop, but it seems a lot steeper. Now I know how to do it, I could do it, but I learned a lot just by watching him do it. This is where the history of this island becomes a little sinister. Here you can see songs by Pablo Neruda, Joan Baez, and even Donna Summer were banned.
Bueno, fueron 24 horas de arena y después seguido durante 6 o 7 meses de ceniza constantemente.
So I'm in the town of San Carlos de Bariloche, on the Argentina side of the Andes, on the southern shore of Lake Huapi, where I had just arrived after crossing the border from Chile and found lodgings for $20 a night at this place, the bungalows Reina Mariana. This is the owner, Senor Edgardo Eusebe, who was kind enough to lend me his bus pass and encouraged me to go back into town and check out the Centro Cívico de Bariloche, which I did because I needed to change money into Argentine pesos and also call Australia because my father had been readmitted to hospital. And I'm glad I did, because although the sun was setting fast, I managed to see this positively Teutonic architecture, lots of Germans, Swiss, Austrians in this area, and check out this plaza. A view of the lake, lots of things going on. There was loud music blaring from this Argentine copy of a Willis Jeep station wagon. Speaking of copies of cars, this was roughly hewn from a log of wood. Nearly every Argentine will recognise that car. And if you're into Formula One racing history or you're a model car collector, then you will know it's a 1950s Mercedes-Benz, the same one that Juan Manuel Fangio won a Grand Prix in Belgium in. Oh, and by the way, there is a connection between Fangio and Australian slang. People of my generation say fangin' it, which means to drive recklessly at high speed. That dates from the early 1950s, before Australia even had TV and people heard Fangio winning the races on the radio all the time. And that has sort of come back in fashion due to it being used in a Mad Max movie. Speaking of names that stick, all across the Centro Cívico were these names, and the date is the 70s. That was during the darkest days of the military junta dictatorship, when thousands of people disappeared. Not that it seemed to worry the younger generation, throwing rugby balls around to all that loud music. Speaking of rugby balls, what's this? Is he holding a rugby ball? No, it says 2 pesos for a photo. While on the rugby theme, you see it says here, Kevingston Rugby Union. And like the Australians invented the word fanging, the Argentines invented Kevingston as an English-sounding name. I heard like chanting in the background, and this appears to be an anti-mining demonstration. It says, don't contaminate us. Cyanide, no. Cyanide's often used in gold mining. Then I saw this. At a place called the Disco Cultural Centre, disco can mean disc, or it can also mean like discotheque. A band called La Fragua recorded in Bariloche something called From the Andes to the Beatles. And that's very interesting, because Argentina is the only country where a fake Beatles group actually toured, trying to pass themselves off as the real Beatles, and also because music in English wasn't always welcomed by the authorities, especially during the military rule of the junta, which ruled Argentina for many years. In fact, musicians of all sorts were often banned, censored, sometimes even thrown in prison and tortured, simply because they said something that was interpreted as being against the government. The Argentine musicians responded by using metaphors, or in some cases, like Charlie Garcia, used an invented language. Singing basically gobbledygook, and with good reason, because the military dictatorship circulated lists to radio stations, lists of songs that were banned. And looking back in time, well, some of them make sense why they were banned, not apt for children's ears, but others make you shake your head and wonder why they were banned. Here you can see songs by Pablo Neruda, Joan Baez, and even Donna Summer were banned. These 2 songs, Get Down, Make Love by Freddie Mercury and Cocaine by Eric Clapton, you could argue that they are immoral. But Jim Morrison and the Doors, Come On Baby Light My Fire, did they think it was encouraging arson attacks? Other songs that were banned included Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd. Well, I could see how a military dictatorship wouldn't like that song. And songs by John Lennon, Yoko Ono, Queen, Rod Stewart, and there's one here by Charlie Garcia. It's called Viernes 3 a.m., which means Friday 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's about suicide. That one got banned. But you don't have to look far to see signs that rock and roll is alive and well in Argentina these days. That censorship and repression ended back in the early 1980s when Argentina lost the Falklands War and they returned to democracy. Heading back to the bungalows, I discovered more of my equipment is now next to useless. And when I was parking the bike, my Holox GPS fell between the handlebars and steering column of the bike. Now the screen is cracked, totally kaput. Luckily I had 2 other Garmin GPS units, but one of them was acting up as well. And they lacked the simplicity of this little Holox unit. Rest in peace, little Holox unit. Early the next morning, I went back into town and asked in this office, the tourist office in Bariloche, about Isla Huemel. Now, Isla Huemel is an island on the lake, and it has a very interesting history. I'll talk about that more in a minute. But unfortunately, I got the bad news that tours of Isla Huemel finished just the last year, so I couldn't go there. The other errand I had to do was get insurance for the bike. I'd ridden all the way from the Peruvian border through Chile, unable to get third-party compulsory insurance. But on the internet, they said if I went to this place, Zanella, or Zanesia, as they say in Argentine Spanish, and I was able to get an insurance cover note for 12 months, so that was one less thing to worry about. Also, they had a workshop out the back, so I booked the bike in for the afternoon to get the shock absorber tensioned up, because it's an adjustable monoshock, but it was still bottoming out, so I needed to get it tensioned up a bit. Now here you can see down the main street, what a beautiful view of the lake. So sunny and tranquil. Then I went on a bit of a ride just exploring the lakeside, and I saw these amazing things. Here you can see the Juan Perón military school, and then there's this rather amazing looking military vehicle. I guess it's for use in snow. And then a bit further along you can see the Centro Atómico de Bariloche, the Bariloche Atomic Center, and these are tied in to Isla Huemel. Now let me tell you about why Isla Huemel is so special. It's only about 1 kilometre offshore from the military base, so it's easily defended. And being situated in the middle of a large lake made it perfect for nuclear and atomic experiments, where a lot of cooling water is needed. This is where the history of this island becomes a little sinister. Following World War II, the president of Argentina, Juan Perón, a former army general, wanted to build his country up to be a major world power, and he enlisted the help of many ex-Nazis and scientists from the Axis powers. Among them was this man, Ronald Richter, who claimed to be an expert in nuclear physics. Perón gave him carte blanche. In fact, it made him the supreme leader of the entire Bariloche area, and an almost unlimited budget, which Richter used to build a device called the thermotron, which he claimed was a nuclear fusion power device. Uncorroborated reports that he had achieved nuclear fusion pleased Juan Perón so much he gave him an honorary doctorate and went out to visit him at Isla Huemel. His announcements provoked a sensation in both local news and international news, though British and American physicists were somewhat skeptical. Richter claimed, and Perón believed him, that he had created temperatures hotter than the sun and they would soon be able to sell nuclear energy in half-litre bottles just like milk. Some people say that Richter's fraudulent experiments added fuel to the international atomic arms race of the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Soon, however, even Perón began to balk at the amount of money that was being swallowed up without tangible results, and a committee was formed under Dr. Balseiro, who was the first of many to denounce Richter as a fraud. And after a few years and swallowing up almost 3% of Argentina's annual budget, the project was cancelled. But that's not the end of the story, because 30 years later, when British secret documents were declassified, it became public knowledge that Juan Perón had planned to invade the Falklands Islands 20 or 30 years before they actually did, probably thinking that if he had an atomic bomb behind him, he'd be less likely to be challenged by Britain, who also had the bomb. Dr. Balseiro's denunciation of Richter saw his star rise while Richter's fell into obscurity, but nuclear research in Bariloche never ended. It was only just beginning. Balseiro arranged for all the atomic instruments and technology to be brought back to the mainland in Bariloche, where he was put in charge of a legitimate Argentine atomic energy research facility that continues to this day. Though there is plenty of evidence around, even here, that not all Argentines support nuclear energy. Interestingly, in the same year of Balseiro's death, Argentina was secretly shipping uranium oxide to Israel for its top-secret nuclear arms program. Until the Puyehue ash explosion, you could do tours out to the island and see Richter's ruined house and laboratory, which were actually used as target practice for Argentine military exercises. Richter himself, by all accounts, the very epitome of a mad scientist, was jailed for a short time but lived out the rest of his life in relative obscurity. unlike this notorious Nazi war criminal Ep30, who had been living freely in Argentina for 50 years under his real name and had been working in several businesses, hotels, delicatessens, and the local German school up until the early 1990s. Eventually, the Argentines deported him to Italy, where he was wanted for the murder of over 300 Italian partisans and Jews. At his trial, he said he wasn't sorry about anything that he did. After several trials and retrials, he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment and died under house arrest, aged 100. But back to Bariloche, and now I'd like to mention there is a slight connection between Bariloche's nuclear industry and the Australian nuclear industry, and its only current atomic reactor at Lucas Heights near Sydney, where I used to live. And Australia recently replaced its ageing nuclear reactor dating to the 1950s with one designed and built by the Argentine Atomic Agency called INVAP. Now I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but you might recall in previous episodes I've talked a lot about Juan Palma. Lucas Heights nuclear facility was recently drawn into an academic test to see if the so-called Michelin documents, allegedly written by Juan Palma, were genuine, and they used nuclear technology to carbon date these highly controversial documents which could rewrite Inca history. But more on that in a later episode. But there is one more connection with this area and Australia. Not many people know there was an Australian colony in South America, in Paraguay to be exact, in a place called Nueva Australia or New Australia. According to books written by Australian author Anne Whitehead, a man by the name of William Lane sent an advanced party out to South America to scout for a location for this new colony. And one of the places they checked out was Bariloche, but for several reasons they discounted it and selected Paraguay instead. Heading back from that Atomic Research Institute, I went looking for a funicular I heard was here. I parked next to this motorhome. They appeared to have come all the way from Germany. Check out that mini bike on the front bumper there. I also noted down their blog, and it's still up if you want to check out their adventures all around South America in that motorhome, but I never got to meet them. Bought my ticket, Teleférico 08. This seems to say it was made in Vienna in Austria. Got the green light. Gotta wait for my green light. Here we go. There it is, motorhome and mini bike from Germany meets meets Chinese motorbike from Peru in Argentina. It always makes me think, ships in the night, never gonna see each other again. This sign says that all the profits go to help a local hospital, and the journey lasts 12 minutes, and there are 42 gondolas which can transport up to 500 people per hour. Almost there. Looks like they're still building something substantial here. Michelangelo's David is the last thing you expect to see up here. Apparently there's an art gallery down there. Whoa, I didn't expect to see this either. A Saint Bernard with a little barrel of brandy around his neck even. They really are gigantic, those dogs. And of course they'd be right at home up here because it would be covered in snow in winter. Using my 450mm zoom lens, I could just make out my bike, parked over 2 kilometres away. I carried my Gigapan and DSLR up here because it would be such a great panoramic lookout. Unfortunately, it was getting late in the afternoon and the sun was shining pretty much directly in the lens, but it still turned out okay. That says the Garden of the Prayer. And this is what's there. Also this, I guess it's a datum point for surveyors. Getting late in the day, time to head back. The top station here is at an altitude of 1,045 metres and the bottom one is at 800 metres, so it's only a 245 metre drop, but it seems a lot steeper. There it is, that infamous atomic island Huemul, or Huemul I think is how you pronounce it, Huemul. Glad to see Atwakey is still parked there, but the German motorhome's gone.
Hola, gracias.
Back on terra firma. Now, to head back out to Zanesia and get that monoshock adjusted. A mechanic called Julian said it was an easy job, but it still took quite a while. All you need is a hammer and a screwdriver because there is a nut that has a very fine thread that you have to screw down to pre-tension the monoshock. Now I know how to do it, I could do it, but I learned a lot just by watching him do it. Helps a lot if you have one of these hydraulic bike lifts. Not technically hard, but finicky and time-consuming. Riding around after this adjustment, I think I know now why 7 of my spokes failed back near Ovalle and nearly killed me. Now the bike felt much more stable. I can tell in hindsight it had been bottoming out and bouncing around before because it didn't do it now. So I've learned a lesson. Keeping your shock absorber correctly adjusted can actually be a matter of life and death. The zipper on my blue waterproof jacket broke, so I decided to invest 450 pesos in a new proper motorcycle jacket, a Fox brand. Matches my boots, which were also Fox. I deliberately bought it 2 sizes too big, so I could wear more of clothes under it against the freezing cold I'm expecting further down in Patagonia.
En Bariloche. Mirá, qué camperita que se lleva el amigo. Son impermeables. Impermeable, una campera.
It didn't end up being waterproof, but anyway.
Bueno, quiero. Olvídate, esta, quiero. 450 euros. Okay.
Riding back to the bungalows, it's hard to believe that this tidy, beautiful town was smothered in ashes only a few months ago. Volcanologists have estimated the eruption of 2011 unleashed the equivalent of 70 Hiroshima atomic bombs. And there are a couple of photos that captured this amazing yet terrifying lightning phenomena. It's interesting to note that Bariloche used to have the highest real estate values in all of Argentina. The Zermatt of South America, you could say. Senor Usebi told me he'd recently completely renovated his apartments, bought new mattresses and everything on the strength of forward bookings, borrowed a lot of money, and then the disaster struck. So money was tight and he was lucky to survive, especially when the carpetbaggers arrived. More on that at the end. He said his son was a professional actor and they'd made a promotional video for Bariloche and the money was very slow in coming. But I'm pretty sure if you listen to his indomitable spirit, he's not going to give up and he will be one of the survivors.
¿Qué haces con el volcán en las cenizas y cosas?
Bueno, fue una experiencia que nunca en 60 años que tengo y que hace exactamente 2 años que vivo acá en San Carlos de Bariloche, nunca me tocó vivir. El día 3 de junio viajé a la ciudad chilena de Osorno y un día espectacular, me dediqué a hacer compras. A la noche regresé hacia Bariloche con toda mi familia y habíamos pasado en la zona del volcán Puyehue un día espectacular. Al otro día, es decir, el 4 de junio, amaneció toda la ciudad de San Carlos de Bariloche a oscuras y con una caída primero de arena, fueron 24 horas de arena que no sabíamos de dónde venía, había tomado actividad el volcán Puyehue del cordón chileno, de la cordillera de Chile. Bueno, fueron 24 horas de arena y después seguido durante 6 o 7 meses de ceniza constantemente. La ceniza que está emitiendo el volcán. No se ha apagado todavía. Y viene para San Carlos de Bariloche según la orientación de los vientos. A veces me armaba por la orientación del viento, que se dirigía a otros lugares como San Martín de los Andes o la ciudad de Neuquén. Realmente, bueno, no solo afectó la salud de la población, sino en materia de turismo. Estuvimos 6 meses hasta fines de diciembre, desde el 4 de junio, sin poder recepcionar de turismo, gente de turismo. Se cerraron los aeropuertos, se cerraron la frontera, el paso Cardenal Zamoré de Chile, y lo más importante fue que el peso de la arena deterioró las rutas, rompió las rutas en Chile y también en Villa Langostura, Argentina. Al tener también malos gobernantes, yo debo decir, y esto lo digo con un poco de bronca, lo digo aquí la zona que rodea a San Carlos de Bariloche es una zona de campos de grandes extensiones que se dedican a la producción de ovinos. Estaba justo la época de las apariciones de los corderos y la mortandad fue aproximadamente del 40 al 50% de los corderos que murieron. Todos esos campesinos fueron ayudados muy poco por el gobierno. He leído en la información de los diarios de aquí de Bariloche, fuente, los voy a nombrar, el Río Negro y el Cordillerano, que se le mandaron fardos de pasto para poder salvar las ovejas, pero los fardos de pasto no eran la cantidad que decían que mandaban, y mandaban el 40% ardido o en malas condiciones el pasto, que era incomible. La oveja, el ovino sufrió mucho porque estaban todos los pastos tapados por arena y se le juntaba en el lomo la arena en la lana, y entonces se le producía un gran peso que caían al piso y se morían. Eso lo vivió todo el campesino de acá de la zona de Picanilleu, la zona de Comayo, de Ingeniero Jacobasi, gente que ha sufrido muchísimo y no han tenido el apoyo que se merecían.
¿Alguien personas se murió en esta catástrofe?
No tengo información de que se hayan muerto personas. Porque fue lento, sobre todo se murieron muchos animales, se murieron muchos truchas en los lagos, porque se cargó mucho de arena el lago Nahuelhuapi y todos los lagos de la zona. Hubo mucha mortandad de peces.
Pero ¿por qué este lago parece muy limpio? Porque
es muy profundo, tiene
muy profundo.
a lo mejor
Más
no sé,
profundo que
180 metros de profundidad.
Ah, por eso.
Es un lago muy profundo y muy amplio. Para tener una idea de la arena que cayó, por ejemplo, en mi predio, que tengo un negocio de explotación de cabañas para turismo, en una superficie de 30 metros cuadrados en el suelo, yo he sacado 70 carretillas de arena. 70 carretillas de arena solamente en la parte de adelante de la cabaña que yo poseo. A eso hay que sumarle todo lo que la carga en el techo, que los 200 metros cuadrados que tiene el techo tenían aproximadamente unos 8 a 10 centímetros de arena de carga arriba, de arena, y la parte de atrás. Bueno, fue una experiencia única. Nosotros pensamos que, yo personalmente pensé que que el volcán iba a durar una semana, 10 días, y hasta la fecha todavía sigue cayendo, el volcán no se apagó, siguen cayendo cenizas, pero las primeras 24 o 36 horas fueron de arena pura. Arena pura, que la arena, se han hecho acá estudios en el Instituto de INVAP y de Tecnología de acá de Bariloche, y es una arena que se pueden fabricar bloques, pero es corrosiva, no se puede utilizar con el hierro. Sí es muy buena para el abono para la tierra, para la vegetación. Crece con gran abundancia el pasto. Según los entendidos, dicen que esto va a ser un vergel, porque eso ya ocurrió con un volcán hace 3 años atrás en la ciudad de Esquel, que llevó toda la arena a la zona de los antiguos, y que hoy se producen las cerezas de exportación más grandes de la Argentina, ¿no? Yo noto acá que ha sido un abono para la tierra, pero ha deteriorado todo lo que sea los automóviles, y se han quemado muchas bombas de, ¿cómo puedo explicar? Ha deteriorado los motores de los vehículos. Las bombas de agua han tenido muchos problemas, toda la actividad automovilística de acá de la ciudad. Sí debo reconocer que la parte más, por los vientos y por cercanía, nosotros estamos a 180 kilómetros del volcán, mientras que Villa Langostura está a 80. Villa Langostura fue la que sufrió más las consecuencias del volcán Puyehue. Bueno, ¿qué puedo agregar? Que económicamente ha sido desastroso para la ciudad, porque es una ciudad netamente turística.
¿Y tú?
Se cerró.
¿Tú sufrí mucho?
Yo sufrí mucho, sí, sufrí mucho. Realmente pasé momentos muy duros, debo decirlo. Yo estoy solo acá, mi familia está en Buenos Aires. Llegó un momento que pensaba en cerrar el complejo, porque solamente me quedaba poca comida para comer y subsistir. No pensé que iba a llegar hasta diciembre del 2011. Creí que iba a claudicar, pero bueno, lo soporté. Y una de las cosas que noté, como en pienso en el mundo, cuando hay catástrofe, están lo que yo llamo aves de rapiña, o los inversores vivos que vinieron a comprar acá propiedades y que la han comprado al 40% del valor.
¿Y algunos de sus amigos se venden?
Se han vendido muchas propiedades. Yo no vendí. Sinceramente, en 3 oportunidades, estando yo muy mal acá en esos 7 meses que duró, Yo pensé que me venían a visitar para hacer un convenio turístico para explotar las cabañas, pero no era esa la intención era comprarme el complejo, y yo quise escuchar la oferta de en qué cifra me cotizaban el valor de mi propiedad, y realmente me ofrecían el 35 o el 40% del valor real. Como esto es un sentimiento, y yo lo hice con mucho esfuerzo, y tomé la determinación de resistir y bajo ningún aspecto vender, porque esto es una pasión, se hizo con mucho esfuerzo, y pienso que me voy a quedar aquí hasta los últimos días de mi vida, ¿no?
That's all for now, amigos. But coming up in the next episode, you'll see. Take a last look at Lake Nahuel Huapi. I think I need to turn left here. There they rent skiing clothes. So I've clocked up 6,000 kilometers in less than 60 days. This is very unusual. 1776 kilometers from Buenos Aires on the famous Ruta 40. You can see here how inflamed my gum had become. It's the old Patagonia Express.
300 to 400 kilometers a day, that's okay by me. But I've been hit with equipment failure.